Okay, I was asked on the forum how I'm going to do the sheeting on the leading edges. Well, I tacked the sheeting on in two spots on the high points of the leading edges, and I trimmed it off with a straight edge on the spar. Now it's not glued anywhere except for the two ends. I was going to use the white glue iron-on method, but after looking at this, it's probably not the best way to do things. So what I'm going to do is I've taken the white glue, the Elmer's Tight Bond, and I've mixed it 50-50, water and the glue. I got a Q-tip here, and I'm going to spread it on the spar. And for those that don't know, when you use water with the glue, when the water evaporates, it makes a super tight joint. It's an old cabinet maker's trick. Not only that, it's a lot lighter. So we spread it on the spar here. Kind of boring to watch me spread glue or whatever, but I was asked how I was going to do the sheeting on this, and we won't go into the glue drying part. We'll just go into the attachment. I got a little glob of glue there. I'm going to get that off. A little bit of CA that was still on the spar. I don't want a lump there, so knock that off. Okay, that's one side. Turn it over and we'll do the other side. I think I'm going to go ahead and put some wax paper in the cradle in case any of the white glue drips through. I don't want it to stick to the cradle. And the wax paper is so thin it won't distort the wing in any way. Set it right up on where the ribs are lined up so that it's not going to be warped in any way. Spread the glue. A lot of work to these things. Well, I'm glad I put the wax paper on there. I just saw glue drop onto the cradle. When this dries, I'll come back and detail glue all the ribs with the CA. I am going to put a couple of tacks on it so that it doesn't move with the CA, but we're going to let this dry for an hour. Like I said, I'm not in a big rush to get this done. I would like to have it done before the September contest. Okay, so we got the glue spread out on the spar. Make sure it's even. And then I'm going to take the CA, I'm going to pull it back, and I'm going to tack it in a couple spots so that it lays down in the right spot. about every other rib. Pull it tight, you can feel it touching the ribs. Somebody figure out a glue bottle that doesn't clog up, I'll buy a dozen. I don't know how Bob Hunt does it, but you can best bet when you get a wing from Bob, it's perfect. It's nice. Okay, we got one side tacked on. I'm going to turn it over. Oh, see it popped up there. Turn it over and tack it on the other side. Pull it tight. That doesn't need to be tacked, just on the end here. Oh boy, pop up, down. I know what we'll do. Couldn't get it to sit down there for a minute. Remember what I told you, no sanding on this sheeting after you get it on there, so you want to get it on in the right spot, kind of eyeball down it. Now what we're going to do is put it back in the cradle, put the mold buck part on it. I have some real heavy steel weights. These come out of a server. They're real heavy. And this is going to ensure us this is going to be straight. And that's basically it. Just let it dry. Make sure all the reds are touching. They all look good. And we'll come back in an hour and that'll be the end of that. You can see I got some tension. What's up with this? Tension on a rib here. Now I'll figure that out when I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to set some weight on the trailing edge too. I got to be real careful with this. Let's see here. I don't want to put any dents in the trailing edge, so we'll take a block of 3/4 3/4 by 3 by 36, set it on the trailing edge, and then weight it. And that's it. We'll come back in an hour and take it out, and we'll see how it came out. If it didn't come out quite straight, I'll have to steam it, but normally these are straight. So we'll see in about an hour. Well, I wanted to touch on this before I go any farther. We know we're going to install my hinges, which are drilled into the trailing edge, and this trailing edge is only 1/4 inch. So, in my opinion, that's not enough meat to have that, to hold that hinge. So, I've sanded up some 1-inch stock into wedges, and this will be put in between the sheeting and glued, so that the hinge will glue into these blocks. Now, whether you use my hinges or plate hinges, it doesn't much matter. I think it's a good idea to go ahead and do this, and this is why I stopped building for a moment and wanted to emphasize this. So you just take this block and drop it in, drop the wedge in. That one doesn't quite fit, I have to re-sand that. Drop it in until it drops down to the trailing edge so that the hinge has a solid anchor point. I'm going to have to sand these a little bit thinner. So, that's just a thought. That's what I do. You may choose to do something different. But I'll be back in a little while when I get the cap strips on it. One other thing I'd like to touch on, which should not be left out, and that is the shear webbing that goes between the two trailing edge sheetings. This offers a lot of strength and it doesn't gain any weight. You can use 3/32, you can use 1/16, you can use 1/32, but you need to put a cross grain shim between the two pieces of sheeting. That way you won't get that starved horse look on the trailing edge. And that offers a lot of strength to the trailing edge. Make sure that you glue your blocks in, but I just showed you before you put that sheeting in. And that makes for a clean install. So all these little things that I do, you know, you don't get to see much of this stuff on the outside of the airplane. You only get to see the finishing that I do. And we are going to do a basic finishing video when I do this. But it's rather boring watching paint dry, so I don't want to take up a lot of time with, you know, I've watched some of the other videos. It's on and on and on. Sanding, doping, painting. You know, I'll show you a couple coats and then finish the rest off camera and come back. And it's just like I'm doing with the wing here. You know, do some, come back, make sure I expound on the important aspects of the video. And this wedge here is very important, and that goes in the trailing edge between the sheeting. And the reason why that's important is the hinge will drill into this, and you have a whole inch of material to have that tang hold on to instead of just a 1/4 inch, so we won't get those pulling out. So I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, this is where I'm at now. I finished off all the cap strips and both sides of the wing. I've set them in the cradles that are weighted, and I'm going to join them together in the center. I'm going to epoxy the two wing halves together. What I did was I took a string on the table and I ran it across and made sure this was perfectly straight. So now we'll go ahead and glue that together. Be back in a minute. Okay, we're going to mix up some epoxy and glue the center joint. What's going on here? get this open. Now this is a structural joint, so make sure you use enough epoxy. And mix it up real good. We're going to be cutting out most of this rib anyway and joining it in the center with a compression or shear spar. I think it's called a compression spar. Smear plenty of it on. Spilling it on the glass, it's not good. We'll have the cradle stuck to the glass. So, to get a rag and wipe that up. Okay. Probably should have put down some wax paper, but that's alright. Just mate these two together. And I got some clamps here to pull it together. And then we're going to sight down, shoot, cracked it. Sight down the trailing edge. It's straight. Yeah, it didn't hurt the rib. Sixteenth is just so delicate. That'll be fine. And now we let it sit. I have it weighted down with these big server weights here to hold it straight and clamped. And 1 inch of dry in about half an hour. I'll go ahead and detail glue it again to make sure that we have it all locked up real good. But other than that, that's how I set them together. It's not a big mystery. A little bit of CA in the crack along with the epoxy. A lot of stress on that center section. I'll go ahead and after the wing has the center sheeting in there and the compression spar and the bell crank mounted, I'll go ahead and run a 3/4 inch piece of fiberglass over the center section or you can use the carbon veil several times over the center and then overlap the silk span with one run this side and the other run that side, so you get a double layer in the center. But you want to make sure that you get this center joint nice and solid. So that's basically it. We'll come back in about a half an hour. Take it out of the cradle. I'm going to weigh it. I think it's around a 6-ounce wing finished. And that's a good deal. And it's perfectly straight. So we'll see you in a bit. Well, we've let it set up. And I've cut the center rib out of it. And made sure it was completely accurately straight. I weighed it. It weighs 5.6 ounces. And that's pretty good. It come out really nice, come out really straight. I'm real happy with it. We'll go ahead and get some tips cut up. The Continental XL that I built has the similar tips, so I'll go ahead and trace around those and add those. I have a set of Continental plans around somewhere that show the flaps that have a secondary rounded sculpted tip, and they have rounded fairings in the center, and then of course they're rounded in the front too, and I'll do that just like I did on my Continental XL. So we're probably a few days out from getting this wing installed. I have to do the center section, the compression spar, and the bell crank mounting. On the bell crank mount, I am going to be using the bushed horns, and here's the horn I'm going to use, and I have to figure out how wide the flaps are going to be, and I have to mount the bearings, which are here in this particular configuration. Here again, I talked about ball links and what makes these so much freer. When you use a bushing like this, it's a 1/2 inch of surface area. When you use a bushing like I'm going to put on it, it's an 1/8 of an inch surface area. And trust me, it makes a world of difference. Now I did block up the center here with those wedge blocks I was showing you. We're going to drill the holes, and we're going to mount those bushings right there, and it'll be 3/16 off the trailing edge, and super free. And you cannot beat these hinges for freeness. Absolutely impossible. I've never seen anything as free as these, other than the old cloth hinges. But we're not going to use those because I don't like how they look, and they really don't last as long as these piano type hinges. But on the wing, it turned out really nice. Make sure that you put the shear web in the trailing edge, and it also has a shear web between each one of the ribs out past the landing gear blocks. I've got to go ahead and get some material tomorrow to finish up the landing gear blocks. So we're at 5.6 the way it sits. About the time I get the landing gear and the tips on this, so we'll say 5, 6, 6, 6, 7. It'll be a 7-ounce wing, including the bell crank and horn. Maybe 8 ounces, including the bell crank and horn. And then you figure an ounce a piece for the flaps. We're looking at 10-ounce completed wing, ready to install, cover and install. So I'm going to go ahead and put the 2/10 veil on this because I want this airplane to look rather nice in tribute to Tom, and it will be Miss Ashley Red. I'm thinking about adding some pearl to Miss Ashley Red, and Derek Berry is making me some paint masks so that I can do the gold leaf Minado here, and then my numbers here in the Old English letters, and of course the 7 shades of red on this. But all the major components are now made. We're on day 13. Part of it keep falling off. We're on day 13, and we're really coming along now, and it'll go quick from here because all the hard stuff's done. So I would say we're under 2 weeks. This is the 13th day. I would say by 21 days we'll be finishing. And depending on the finish on the outside, this airplane will probably take 2 months, because the finish is what takes the time. So I'm going to cut a few more pieces tonight. I'll go ahead and load this up on the web for you guys to see where I'm at. I can't remember whether I covered the sheeting installation or not, and how that was done is I tacked it on each end with CA, pulled it around. I put white glue on top of the spar, thinned 50-50. That sucks the wood together. And then I detail glued the inside, glued all the ribs with CA on the inside. After that was done, I did the shear web, installed the shear webbing on this so that you could get it absolutely straight. And then the wing was set into cradles and epoxied together in the center. You can build it all in one piece, or you can basically do it like this, and the way Bob Hunt shows it, he does it in one setting, but they're actually 2 separate halves, so there's not much difference, I don't believe. So that's about all I got for tonight. I'm hoping that you're getting something out of these videos. Give you some inspiration anyway on how to do things. After doing electrics, and they're a little bit different electrics, I'm going to be using some of the electrics construction techniques on this particular model. And what I'm getting at there is the cowl mounting. I really hate all those screws and bolts and stuff sticking out of the cowl. So we're going to use the rare earth magnets to hold that on. I don't see why that would be any problem. A couple of dowels in the back. And I'm also thinking about, because this is not a piped airplane, doing this 1960s style air outlets underneath with 2 finger holes and then a real nice looking cowl opening on the front, kind of like Ted Fancher does. And Ted has to be the absolutely best cowl man I've ever seen. He builds beautiful cowl. They must take weeks to do. They're really nice, really spectacular. But I'm looking at the fuselage over there, the profile, it's the expectations are there. It says, it screams Minado, even though it's a large airplane, and it's not a I-beam wing, it's the geodesic wing. This particular wing is the same one that's in my Continental XL, and it was cut special for me by Bob to have more ribs than a normal geodesic wing. This is not like the Thunderbolt wing that has probably 10 or maybe even more than that less ribs. The reason why I wanted more ribs is that I was using the 16th inch sheeting on this, and the ribs are about in the leading edge or every inch apart, so it has a lot of wood in it. But I'm real happy with the weight, I'll get this posted and do some more work later on this evening, and you know, just onward and upward. So until I see you again, stay tuned.